The son had a fever of 40 degrees Celsius and called his billionaire father, but he didn't answer because he was busy organizing his mistress's birthday party. When he came home, he found everything empty, along with the divorce papers. The assets were frozen, and he fell to his knees, begging. But... Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family channel. May the Almighty wrap every woman in a light so gentle, so healing, that every hidden wound inside her finally finds peace. May the one who created her strength bless her with mornings full of hope, nights full of comfort, and days that bloom with joy she never has to beg for. May every woman who carried pain in silence be rewarded with miracles that lift her spirit. May every mother, daughter, sister, and wife be surrounded by love that protects her, respect that uplifts her, and blessings that follow her wherever she steps. May her heart never break again, may her dreams never dim, and may her worth be honored the way heaven honors those who give more than they ever receive. And my family, your love is the heartbeat of this channel. When you stay silent, it feels like I'm speaking alone. But one comment from you, one moment of your presence, reminds me that I am not walking this journey by myself. I promise from my heart, I will reply to every message you write. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, I am with Mr. Peter. The thermometer read 39.8 degrees Celsius, and Greta Andrews could feel her son's skin burning through his pajamas as she carried him to the car. Charles whimpered against her shoulder, his 9-year-old body heavy with fever and exhaustion, his breath coming in short gasps that made her heart clench with fear. Each step toward the elevator felt like moving through water, time stretching and compressing simultaneously. The hallway lights seemed too bright, casting harsh shadows that made everything feel surreal and terrifying. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" His voice was small, confused, the fever making him younger than his years. "He's working, baby. He'll meet us there." The lie tasted bitter in her mouth, coating her tongue like ash, but what else could she say? That she'd called his father 17 times with no answer. That Daniel Lewis, billionaire CEO and father of the year according to every magazine profile, couldn't be bothered to pick up his phone when his son was burning alive. That she'd left voicemails begging him to call back, her voice getting more desperate with each one. That the last message had been her crying, saying, "Please, just please call me back. Our son needs you." The drive to Manhattan General took 14 minutes that felt like hours. Every red light was an eternity. Every time Charles shifted against her in the passenger seat, Greta's hand went to his forehead, measuring the heat, calculating danger. She'd been a corporate strategist for 15 years before she'd slowly let that identity fade into Daniel's shadow. But before that, she'd been pre-med at Yale. She knew fever protocols. She knew the symptoms of febrile seizures. She knew that 40 degrees was the line between manageable and dangerous. She knew they were approaching that line fast. The emergency room was fluorescent bright and antiseptic cold, the smell of disinfectant mixing with something else she couldn't identify. Fear, maybe. Desperation. A nurse took one look at Charles and moved them past the waiting area immediately. Greta tried Daniel's phone again while they took her son's temperature, while they asked questions she answered on autopilot, while Charles cried that his head hurt and his stomach hurt, and where was his daddy? Why wasn't Daddy here? Why didn't Daddy come? No answer. Voicemail. Again. She stood there in the bright emergency room, holding her phone, and made call number 18, then 19, then 20. Each time his voice smooth, confident, asking her to leave a message. "Mom, we need to get him into examination now. His temperature is 40.3. The doctor's voice was calm but urgent, practiced in delivering bad news without causing panic, and Greta felt something crack inside her chest as they wheeled her baby away, his small hand reaching for hers until the doors swung shut between them. She stood in the hallway, her phone still clutched in her hand like a lifeline to nowhere, and called Daniel one more time. Call number 21. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. His voice, smooth and confident, asked her to leave a message. That voice she'd once loved, now just a recording, a barrier between her emergency and his indifference. She didn't leave a message this time. Instead, Greta walked to the waiting area and sat in a plastic chair that was bolted to the floor. Around her, other families waited in various states of crisis. A father paced while his wife cried. An elderly couple held hands, both staring at the doors their daughter had disappeared through. All these people, all these emergencies, all these moments when the people you love need you most. She pulled out her phone and opened Instagram, something she rarely did anymore. Daniel said social media was a waste of time, a distraction from real life. Daniel said a lot of things. Judy Foster's profile was public. Greta had looked at it exactly once before, 3 weeks ago, when she'd found a hotel receipt in Daniel's suit pocket and decided to stop being naive. The girl was 29, pretty, in that effortless way that made Greta feel every one of her 38 years, and worked as an event coordinator for high-end clients, including, apparently, Daniel Lewis. Tonight, Judy's Instagram story glowed on Greta's screen like evidence in a crime she'd been pretending wasn't happening. The Carlisle Hotel ballroom, decorated in gold and white, champagne fountains catching light like liquid diamonds, a string quartet in the corner playing something classical and expensive, 200 people in evening wear, celebrating Judy Foster's 29th birthday like it was the social event of the season. And there, in the center of it all, Daniel, her husband, Charles's father, wearing the Tom Ford tuxedo Greta had picked up from the dry cleaner last week, the one he'd said he needed for a board dinner, his arm around Judy's waist, possessive and comfortable like he'd held her 1,000 times before. His lips pressed to hers at what the timestamp said was midnight. The comments below were full of heart emojis and congratulations. Someone had written, "You two are perfect together," while their son burned with fever in a hospital bed. While Greta sat alone in a hallway, watching nurses rush past, listening to other people's emergencies echo off tile walls. Greta watched the video 3 times, not because she needed to see it again, but because she needed to feel what she was feeling. The absolute stillness that comes right before something inside you breaks so completely that it can never be put back together. She scrolled through Judy's feed. There were other photos. Daniel at restaurants Greta had never been to. Daniel at a wine tasting in Napa. Daniel on a beach somewhere tropical, his hand on Judy's back. All of them posted publicly, carelessly, like he didn't care who saw. Or maybe he just knew his wife never checked social media, knew she was too busy raising their son, too busy being supportive, too busy making herself small so he could feel big. "Ms. Andrews," a nurse appeared in front of her, "your son's fever has broken. The doctor wants to keep him for observation for a few more hours, but he's going to be fine." Greta stood, her legs steadier than they should have been, muscle memory taking over when her mind couldn't. "Can I see him?" "Of course. Follow me." Charles was asleep in the hospital bed, small and pale against the white sheets, an IV in his thin arm delivering fluids his body desperately needed. Greta sat beside him and took his free hand, so much smaller than hers, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness. She pulled out her phone and typed one message to Daniel. "Charles almost died tonight, but you already made your choice." She hit send, watched the message deliver, watched it change to read. No response. Then she deleted Instagram from her phone. Not because she was hurt, not because she couldn't stand to see more, because she didn't need to see any more. She already knew exactly what she was going to do. The sun was rising when they finally went home. Charles slept in the back seat, exhausted but stable, his breathing finally even and calm. Greta drove through Manhattan streets turning gold with morning light, her hands steady on the wheel, her mind already 3 steps ahead, planning and calculating with the precision that had made her one of the most sought-after strategic consultants in the city. She thought about the voicemails she'd left, The desperation in her voice, the way she'd begged him to call back. She'd never begged Daniel Lewis for anything again. Daniel had made his choice at midnight, kissing another woman while their son's fever spiked towards seizure territory. Now, Greta was going to make hers. And Daniel Lewis was going to learn what it meant to lose everything that ever mattered. Chapter 2. The Performance. Daniel walked through the door at 7:30 in the morning carrying a bag of pastries from that French bakery on Madison Avenue that Greta loved. His phone had died during the party, he'd already decided to say. Some kind of battery issue, completely unexpected. He'd been at an emergency board meeting that ran late into the night, discussing the potential acquisition, then crashed at the office rather than disturb her. It was a good lie. Believable. He'd used variations of it before, and Greta had always accepted them with that understanding smile of hers, never pushing, never questioning. The apartment smelled like coffee and something sweeter. Pancakes, maybe. Maple syrup. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in warm gold that made the space feel peaceful and domestic. Daniel hung his tuxedo jacket in the hall closet, noticing a slight smudge of lipstick on the collar that he quickly wiped away, and walked into the kitchen, his apology speech ready, his face arranged in tired concern. Greta stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease, wearing yoga pants and one of his old Yale t-shirts. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes like bruises, but she turned when she heard him and smiled. Not the tight smile of suspicion, not the wounded smile of someone who'd been up all night worrying, just a normal Saturday morning smile. "Good morning. Coffee's fresh?" Daniel stopped, wrong-footed by the greeting. No accusation, no questions about where he'd really been, no tight-lipped silence that meant trouble brewing, just normalcy. "Morning, I brought pastries." "Oh, that's sweet. Charles will love those." She turned back to the stove, perfectly calm, perfectly pleasant, like this was just another Saturday morning in their perfectly normal life. "Where is he?" "Still sleeping. He had a rough night." Daniel poured himself coffee, watching her carefully over the rim of his cup, searching for cracks in her composure. "Rough night?" "Just a stomach bug, I think. Kept him up for a while. Nothing serious." She slid pancakes onto a plate and brought them to the table. "Sit. You must be exhausted." He sat, suspicion warring with relief. She didn't seem angry, didn't seem suspicious. She seemed normal. Had his message not gone through? Had she not seen the text he'd sent at 2 in the morning, the one he'd immediately deleted, saying he was crashing at the office? "Yeah, the board meeting ran really late. Phone died and I didn't have a charger, so I just crashed in my office. Didn't want to wake you driving home at 3 in the morning." That was thoughtful. Greta sat across from him with her own coffee, cradling the warm mug between her hands. "How did it go?" "The meeting?" Daniel scrambled to add details to a meeting that never happened, building the lie carefully. "Good. Challenging but good. We're looking at a potential acquisition. Tech startup in Boston. Could be a game changer for our mobile division. The founders are young, brilliant, a bit arrogant. Reminded me of us when we were starting out." "Exciting." She sipped her coffee, looking at him over the rim. Her dark eyes were unreadable, like mirrors, reflecting nothing back. "You should take a shower and get some real sleep. You look exhausted." "I might do that." He ate a few bites of pancake, his mind racing. This was too easy. She wasn't this understanding. She always had questions when he worked late, always wanted details, wanted to connect, wanted to be part of his world. Was she testing him, waiting for him to slip up? Or had she finally stopped caring enough to ask? "Actually," Greta said, setting down her cup with deliberate care, "I was thinking about something." Here it comes, Daniel thought, his stomach tightening. She knows. She has to know. "Yeah? We've been married 12 years next month. That's a long time. I was thinking maybe we should do something special. Renew our vows maybe? Something small and intimate, just close friends and family. Daniel stared at her. This was not what he'd expected. Not even close. Of all the things she could say right now, this was the last thing he'd anticipated. You want to renew our vows? Is that crazy? She smiled, but something in her eyes made him uneasy. Something he couldn't quite identify, like looking at a familiar painting and realizing the details had changed. I know things have been stressful with your work schedule. I just thought it might be nice to reconnect, remind ourselves why we chose each other in the first place. Remember what we used to be. No, it's not crazy, it's... Daniel forced himself to smile back, arranging his features into what he hoped looked like genuine warmth. It's a really nice idea, really thoughtful. Good. Greta stood, took her plate to the sink, rinsed it methodically. I'll start looking at dates. Nothing elaborate, just something meaningful. Maybe at the house in the Hamptons, just family and close friends. We could do it at sunset on the beach, make it romantic. She kissed the top of his head as she passed, and Daniel caught a whiff of her perfume. The same perfume she'd worn on their wedding day. The same perfume he used to love before it started smelling like obligation and guilt. After she left the kitchen, Daniel sat alone with his coffee and tried to figure out what had just happened. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, saw 3 missed calls from Judy from early this morning, and 1 text. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? I'm worried. People are asking me questions about us, and I don't know what to say. He deleted it and turned off his phone. He sat there for another 5 minutes, drinking his coffee, thinking about Greta's proposal to renew their vows. It didn't make sense. She'd been distant for months, quiet, almost withdrawn, and now she wanted to renew their vows, unless she suspected something and this was her way of trying to save the marriage. Or maybe she was just lonely. Maybe she missed him. The guilt flickered for a moment, then faded. He pushed it down like he always did. Upstairs, Daniel showered and fell into bed, exhausted from a night of champagne and lies and dancing and the constant performance of being someone Judy thought he was. He was asleep in minutes, never noticing that Greta wasn't in the apartment anymore. She was 3 blocks away, sitting in a corner booth at a quiet cafe, across from 3 people Daniel had never met. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice, Greta said, sliding a folder across the table to the woman in the navy suit. Catherine Chen, senior partner at Manhattan's most aggressive divorce firm, opened the folder and began reading. Her expression never changed, but her eyes sharpened with interest, the look of a predator spotting prey. When did you first suspect? 3 weeks ago. I found a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket, $400 for a room he claimed to never have booked, the Mandarin Oriental. I called the hotel. They confirmed a reservation under his name, charged to his corporate card. When I asked Daniel about it, he said it must have been a client meeting he'd forgotten about. But the date on the receipt was a Saturday. He told me he was playing golf with Thomas that day. And you're certain about the affair? Greta pulled out her phone, showed Catherine the Instagram story from last night. The kiss at midnight, the timestamp, the ballroom full of witnesses, the comments calling them a perfect couple. He told me he was at a board meeting. His phone died, apparently, while our son was in the hospital with a fever that could have caused brain damage. Catherine nodded slowly, making notes on a legal pad. And your son? Spent last night in the emergency room with a fever that nearly caused a seizure. I called my husband 31 times. He didn't answer once. Didn't even respond to my text this morning telling him what happened. He saw the text? It showed as read. He just didn't respond. The man beside Catherine, a forensic accountant named Robert Marsh, leaned forward with obvious interest. You mentioned possible financial irregularities. Daniel has moved money from our joint accounts. Not hidden, just casual transfers I don't think he expected me to notice. I want to know where it went and what it was used for. Every penny, every transaction. I'll need account access. Greta handed him a folder. Everything's in there. Passwords, account numbers, credit card statements for the past 18 months. I've been documenting everything since I found that first receipt. The third person at the table, a private investigator named Sarah Voss, hadn't spoken yet. She was younger than the others, sharp-eyed and efficient. You said you only need confirmation, not a full investigation. I already know what's happening, Greta said quietly. I just need evidence that will hold up in court, and I need it fast. Can you do that in 1 week? Sarah smiled. I can do it in 3 days, maybe 2 if I push. Catherine closed the folder. Ms. Andrews, I have to ask. Are you sure about this? Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your husband will know exactly what kind of opponent he's facing. Greta thought about Charles in that hospital bed, small and pale. About 17 unanswered calls. 21, actually, if you counted the ones this morning. About Daniel's lips on another woman's mouth while his son cried for him in a fluorescent hallway. About 12 years of making herself smaller so he could feel bigger, of celebrating his victories that were built on her strategies, of being the perfect supportive wife while he took credit for her work and her ideas and her brilliance. I'm sure, she said. Start the process. I want this done before he realizes what's happening. And if he tries to reconcile once he knows? He won't, Greta said. But if he does, tell me something, Catherine. In your professional experience, do men who cheat while their children are in the hospital deserve second chances? Catherine's smile was sharp as a blade. In my professional experience, Ms. Andrews, those men deserve exactly what they get. Greta stood, shook hands with each of them, and walked out of the cafe into the bright morning sun. She had a son to take care of, a husband to fool for 1 more week, and a plan to execute with surgical precision. Daniel Lewis thought he was careful, thought he was smart, thought his wife was too focused on being supportive to notice his betrayals. He was about to learn he'd been married to someone infinitely smarter, and that was going to cost him everything he thought he'd built. Chapter 3. The Architect of Ruin, Greta Andrews. Consulting occupied a small office suite in a building Daniel had never visited, in a part of Manhattan he rarely traveled to. The brass nameplate on the door was understated, professional, and completely invisible to a husband who'd never bothered to ask what his wife actually did with her time. Coffee, Ms. Andrews? Her assistant, a brilliant recent MBA graduate named Simone, set a cup on her desk without waiting for an answer. Thank you. Greta turned from the window overlooking the street below, watching the morning rush of people heading to offices and coffee shops. 4 days had passed since that night at the hospital. 4 days of playing the perfect wife while building a case that would dismantle Daniel's entire world. 4 days of smiling at him over breakfast while her lawyers prepared documents that would destroy him. Her desk was covered in documents. Sarah Voss had delivered even faster than promised, the kind of thorough work that justified her premium rates. The private investigator sat across from Greta now, walking through a file that was 3 inches thick. 62 hotel stays in 18 months, Sarah said, flipping through receipts with practiced efficiency. Always the same chain, always charged to his corporate card. I cross-referenced with his calendar and public appearance records. Every single stay corresponds to a day when Judy Foster was in the same city. Sometimes they overlap with legitimate business trips. Sometimes they're completely fabricated. Your husband has been lying about his travel for over a year. The corporate card, Greta repeated, making a note. That's important. Very. It means he's using company resources for personal expenses. Any ethics clause in his contracts or board agreements will view that as a violation. I've documented each instance with timestamps, amounts, and corresponding calendar entries, showing what he told you he was doing versus what he was actually doing. Greta made another note. What else? Jewelry purchases totaling over $200,000. Lease payments on an apartment in Judy's name, $15,000 monthly, paid from a personal account he opened 18 months ago. That account is funded by regular transfers from your joint investment portfolio. $3,000 here, $5,000 there, $10,000 when he thought you wouldn't notice. It adds up. He's been stealing from us to pay for her apartment. Legally, it's more complicated than that, but ethically, yes. He's been systematically moving marital assets to fund an extramarital relationship without your knowledge or consent. And there's more. Sarah pulled out another folder. Restaurant charges, always expensive, always two people. Flowers delivered to her apartment every week. A weekend trip to Napa that he told you was a client meeting. Skiing in Aspen that he said was a corporate retreat. Your husband has been living a completely separate life. Greta sat back in her chair, her mind working through the implications like solving a complex puzzle. 12 years. She'd been married to this man for 12 years, given up partnership tracks at law firms where recruiters had promised her a fast path to senior positions, turned down corporate positions that would have made her a name in her field, stepped back from her own ambitions to support his, because that's what you did when you loved someone. You made space for their dreams. You celebrated their victories like they were your own. She'd just forgotten to ask herself what happened when those dreams didn't include you anymore. There's one more thing, Sarah said quietly. She pulled out a phone, pressed play on an audio file. Daniel's voice filled the office, slurred with alcohol and unmistakable. I can't wait to finally be free. Once Charles is older, custody won't be as complicated. Another few years, and I can actually start living my real life. The life I deserve. Not this pretend family man act I've been putting on. The recording was dated 2 months ago. A voicemail to Judy that she'd saved, probably as insurance, that Sarah had recovered from cloud backups Judy didn't know could be accessed. Greta listened to it twice, her face expressionless, her hands perfectly still. Then she asked Sarah to send her the file and turn off the playback. Anything else I should know? That depends, Sarah said carefully. How far do you want me to dig? What do you mean? I mean that there are things in here that go beyond the affair. Business decisions that might be questionable. Meetings with competitors that don't quite add up. Communications that suggest he's been sharing confidential company information. I'm not saying your husband is doing anything illegal, but you're not saying he isn't. I'm saying that if you wanted to really hurt him professionally, there's more here than just an affair. There's a pattern of questionable judgment that a board might find concerning, especially when combined with the ethics violations. Greta considered this. She wasn't vindictive by nature, wasn't cruel. But she thought about Charles asking for his daddy, about fever-bright eyes and small hands reaching for comfort that never came. About a 9-year-old boy learning that the people you love most can abandon you when you need them. Document everything, she said. I want options. I want to know every vulnerability he has. After Sarah left, Greta spent 2 hours on the phone. First with Robert Marsh, her forensic accountant, who walked her through Daniel's financial vulnerabilities with the enthusiasm of someone who loved finding hidden weaknesses in seemingly solid structures. Then with Catherine Chen, who explained exactly how the prenuptial agreement Daniel had insisted on 12 years ago was about to become his worst nightmare. The prenup had been Daniel's idea, back when he was just a startup founder with more ambition than assets, and Greta was a Yale law graduate with family money she never mentioned. He'd wanted to protect his future earnings. She'd agreed because she loved him and didn't care about his money. She'd been 26 and stupid with love. The irony was almost beautiful. That prenup had one clause that Daniel's lawyers had obviously never read carefully enough. In cases of proven infidelity with evidence of marital asset misappropriation, the wronged party retained primary ownership of jointly acquired assets. Assets like the penthouse they lived in, which Greta's consulting income had provided the down payment for 12 years ago. Assets like the Hampton Beach house, purchased primarily with funds from Greta's firm during a particularly profitable quarter. Assets like the investment portfolio Daniel thought was his success story, but which had been built on Greta's advice, Greta's strategies, Greta's work. Daniel had been so focused on protecting his hypothetical future wealth that he'd never noticed he was already living off hers. How long will the asset freeze take? Greta asked Catherine. With this evidence, I can file for emergency relief and have it approved within 48 hours. The moment he's served with divorce papers, every joint account will be locked pending litigation. He won't be able to access anything without court approval. And custody. With that voicemail and the hospital records from the fever incident, I can make a strong case for primary physical custody with supervised visitation. No judge will look kindly on a father who ignored dozens of calls while his son was in medical crisis, especially not when combined with evidence that he views his child as an obstacle to his preferred lifestyle. Greta stood, walked to the window again. Below, New York City moved in its endless rhythm. Millions of people, millions of lives, millions of moments of choice that determined who we became. Daniel had made his choice. Now Greta was making hers. "Catherine, I need you to do something else," she said, still looking out at the city. "I need you to reach out to Meridian Group. Tell them I'm interested in discussing a position as senior strategic advisor." Catherine's pause was telling. Meridian is Lewis Enterprises' largest competitor. "I know. Daniel will view that as a betrayal." "Daniel forfeited his right to use that word?" Greta turned back to face her lawyer. "I helped build his company. Every major strategy for the first 8 years came from our conversations, from my consulting work, from frameworks I developed and handed him over dinner and weekend brainstorming sessions. He presented them as his own ideas, and I let him because I thought we were partners. But we're not partners. We never were. I was his secret weapon, and he never even acknowledged it. Never gave me credit. Never mentioned my name in interviews. Never said thank you. So you're going to become someone else's secret weapon instead." "No," Greta corrected. "I'm going to stop being secret. I'm going to let the world see exactly who's been behind the strategies all along, and Daniel is going to watch his empire crumble while I build someone else's, while I finally get the recognition I deserve." Catherine Chen had been practicing law for 23 years. She'd seen angry spouses, vengeful spouses, spouses consumed by hurt and rage. But she'd rarely seen what she saw in Greta Andrews's face right now. Perfect, cold clarity. "When do you want to serve him?" "Friday. I have one more thing to arrange first." That afternoon, Greta had lunch with Daniel's executive assistant, Maya. They met at a small Italian restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place where conversations disappeared into ambient noise and clinking silverware. The hostess seated them at a quiet corner table. Maya was 31, brilliant, and fiercely loyal. Greta had hired her 5 years ago when Maya was drowning in student debt and desperate for a break, when no one else would even interview her because she'd dropped out of grad school to take care of her sick mother. Greta had convinced Daniel to hire her, had vouched for her, had mentored her through the first difficult year. Maya had cried in Greta's office once, thanking her for giving her a chance when everyone else saw her as damaged goods. "I need your help," Greta said once their food arrived, "and I need you to understand that what I'm asking could put you in a difficult position." Maya set down her fork. "How difficult?" "Daniel is having an affair. I'm filing for divorce. I need documentation of his schedule, his expenses, and his communications for the past 18 months. You want me to give you confidential company information? I want you to give me evidence of how my husband has been using company resources to fund an extramarital affair. Everything I'm asking for is either already legally mine to access as his spouse, or is evidence of misconduct that the board would want to know about. You wouldn't be betraying the company. You'd be protecting it." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The spa weekend next Thursday. That's not a business trip, is it?" "No, it's not. I've been booking hotels and filing expenses for meetings that I've had questions about, dinners that seemed personal, weekend trips that didn't match any client locations, conference registrations that never showed up on any actual conference websites. I just told myself it wasn't my business." Maya looked sick. "He made me complicit. He used me to cover his tracks. You didn't know, but now you do, and now you get to decide what kind of person you want to be." Maya pulled out her phone. "I can have everything to you by tonight. Calendar entries, expense reports, email trails, all of it. Every lie I helped him tell without knowing it." Maya, you could lose your job. Ms. Andrews, you gave me mine when no one else would. When I was at my lowest point, you saw something in me that no one else did. And if Mr. Lewis has been lying to the company the same way he's been lying to you, then he deserves whatever happens next. She looked Greta in the eye. Besides, I met Charles once. He came to the office for Take Your Kid to Work Day 2 years ago. He's a sweet boy. Mr. Lewis spent 15 minutes with him before sending him home with me because he had meetings. Important meetings, he said. I found out later he'd spent that afternoon at a hotel with someone. I've thought about that a lot lately. What kind of father does that? The kind who's about to learn some very expensive lessons. That night, Greta sat in her home office while Daniel slept upstairs, exhausted from another day of lies. In front of her, files, documents, evidence, strategies. She opened her laptop and began typing an email. To Meridian Group Executive Board subject, formal expression of interest, strategic advisory position. The email was professional, concise, and devastating in its implications, because everyone in the industry knew that Greta Andrews had been married to Daniel Lewis for 12 years. Everyone knew she'd stepped back from her career to support his rise. What they were about to learn was why Daniel Lewis had risen at all. Greta hit send, closed her laptop, and allowed herself one moment of something that felt like grief. Not for Daniel, not even for their marriage. For the woman she'd been 12 years ago, bright and ambitious and foolish enough to believe that making yourself smaller would make someone else love you more. For the girl who'd given up her dreams so someone else could chase theirs. For the partner who'd done all the work and accepted none of the credit. That woman was gone now. In her place was someone Daniel Lewis had never actually met, Greta Andrews, undiminished and done pretending. Chapter 4. The Invitation. The week moved like a countdown to detonation. Daniel noticed nothing unusual. Greta made sure of that. Monday she woke him with coffee and asked about his day with genuine-seeming interest. Tuesday she picked up his dry cleaning and restocked his favorite scotch, the expensive one he saved for celebrations. Wednesday she was affectionate, playful even, initiating intimacy for the first time in months. Daniel responded with confused enthusiasm, clearly relieved that whatever weird mood he thought she'd been in was over. Afterward, he fell asleep holding her, and she lay awake in the dark, planning his destruction. Thursday morning, Greta suggested Daniel take Friday night off. Relax a little. Maybe do something for himself. He'd been working so hard lately, putting in such long hours, making such sacrifices for the company. Actually, Daniel said, buttering his toast with careful precision, I have a dinner meeting Friday. Potential investors. Thomas set it up. Big opportunity, could be worth millions. Greta sipped her coffee, watching him lie to her face with practiced ease, watching him create elaborate details for a meeting that didn't exist. Where? Just some steakhouse downtown. Nothing fancy. I'll probably be home by 10:30 at the latest. That's great, she said, and meant it, because Daniel had just confirmed what she already knew. He'd be at Marcus with Judy, while Greta executed the final phase of her plan. Good luck with the presentation. Thanks. It's going to be a tough sell, but I think we can land them. More lies. Always more lies. That afternoon, while Daniel was at the office, a courier delivered 40 hand-addressed envelopes throughout Manhattan. Each envelope contained a heavy card with elegant script. You are cordially invited to join Greta Andrews for an important announcement regarding her family. Friday, 8 o'clock in the evening, Marcus Restaurant, private dining room. The guest list had been carefully curated over days of strategic planning. Daniel's parents, Eleanor and Richard Lewis, his 3 siblings, Marcus, the oldest brother who'd always looked up to Daniel, Jennifer, the sister who'd defended him through every scandal, and Thomas Jr., the youngest, who'd named his own son after Daniel. Thomas Wright, his business partner and supposed best friend, 6 members of the Lewis Enterprises board, 5 of their closest couple friends, the ones who'd stood up at their wedding, who'd celebrated every anniversary, Daniel's mentor from business school, Professor Hartman, who still told people that Daniel Lewis was his greatest success story. Several prominent members of their social circle who controlled opinion and reputation in their world, and Victoria Hartwell, CEO of Meridian Group, whose presence would become significant very soon. Greta had called in favors, used every connection she'd built over 12 years of being Daniel Lewis's perfect wife, and ensured that the people who mattered most would be in that room when she revealed exactly what kind of man they'd been celebrating all these years. Friday morning, Greta took Charles to school. He'd recovered from the fever, but something in him was different, quieter, more watchful. He was 9 years old, but children saw things adults thought they were hiding. "Mom?" he asked as they pulled up to the school. "Is Dad coming to my soccer game tomorrow?" Greta's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm not sure, honey. He's been very busy with work." "He's always busy with work." Charles gathered his backpack, then paused with his hand on the door handle. "Are you and Dad okay?" "Why would you ask that?" "I don't know. You just seem different. Like you're pretending everything's normal, but it's not. You smile at Dad, but your eyes don't smile. I learned about that in school. Mrs. Peterson says real smiles use your whole face." Greta looked at her son, this small person she and Daniel had created, who deserved so much better than what he was about to witness. "Charles, I want you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever changes, you are loved. By me. Always. Do you understand?" He nodded slowly. "Is Dad in trouble?" "Yes," she said, because she wouldn't lie to him anymore. "But not the kind that hurts you, just the kind that hurts him. And sometimes people need to hurt before they can learn." Charles hugged her tight before getting out of the car, and she noticed how much taller he'd gotten recently. When had that happened? While Daniel was at hotels with Judy, probably. While she was making excuses for his absence at parent-teacher conferences and soccer games. Greta watched him walk into school, his backpack almost too big for his small frame, and felt something harden in her chest. Daniel had better hope Charles forgave him someday, because Greta never would. That evening, Greta dressed with the same care a general might put into battle armor. The dress was deep crimson, structured and elegant, the kind of dress that made statements without saying words. She wore the diamond earrings Daniel had given her for their 10th anniversary, the ones she'd later learned cost less than he'd spent on Judy's birthday party. She wore her wedding ring. Let him see it one last time before she took it off forever. Her phone buzzed. Catherine Chen. "Everyone's confirmed. The room is ready. Press is on standby if you decide to go that route. Are you ready?" Greta looked at herself in the mirror, 38 years old, Yale law graduate, built a consulting firm from nothing while raising a son and playing the devoted wife, smart enough to see the truth, strong enough to face it, and strategic enough to make sure Daniel Lewis never forgot what he'd thrown away. She texted back, "I was born ready." At Marcus, the private dining room glowed with soft lighting and expensive wine. 40 people sat at a long table, murmuring to each other about this mysterious invitation from Greta Andrews. Some were confused. Some were intrigued. Daniel's mother looked worried, kept checking her phone, kept whispering to her husband. Professor Hartman was telling anyone who'd listen that he'd taught Daniel everything he knew about strategic thinking. Thomas Wright looked uncomfortable, like he suspected something bad was coming. They would all understand soon enough. Across town, Daniel and Judy sat at a corner table in Marcus's main dining room. Judy wore white, young and glowing, completely unaware that in approximately 30 minutes her entire carefully constructed world would implode. She'd spent an hour getting ready, Daniel knew, because she'd texted him photos, asking which dress made her look more sophisticated. "I still can't believe you got us a table here," Judy was saying, her hand over Daniel's, her thumb stroking his knuckles in that way that used to make him feel wanted. "This place is impossible to book." "I have connections," Daniel said, enjoying her admiration like a drug he couldn't quit. This was what he'd been missing. Someone who looked at him like he was extraordinary. Someone who didn't ask why he was late or where he'd been or whether he'd remembered to call his son's school about the science fair project. Someone who didn't know him well enough to be disappointed yet. His phone buzzed. Thomas. Emergency. Need you in the back room. Now. Don't ask questions. Just come. Daniel frowned. Thomas knew he was having dinner with Judy tonight. They'd talked about it yesterday. This better be important. I'll be right back, he told Judy, kissing her cheek. Order whatever you want. Get that wine you like. The expensive one. He followed the hallway toward the private rooms, confused when he saw his father standing in the corridor looking like he'd aged a decade in the past week. His father never looked old, never looked uncertain, but tonight he looked both. Dad, what are you doing here? Richard Lewis looked at his son with an expression Daniel couldn't read. Disappointment, maybe, or disgust, or something worse than both. Your wife invited us, said she had an announcement, thought it might be good news like she was pregnant again or something. Your mother's been hoping for another grandchild. He paused. I don't think it's good news, Daniel. Before Daniel could respond, the door to the private dining room opened and Thomas appeared. His face was granite. His jaw was clenched. You need to come in here, right now. What's going on? Thomas, what the hell is this? Just get in here before I drag you in. Daniel walked into the room and stopped cold. 40 faces turned to look at him. His mother, his siblings, his business partners, his friends, every person who mattered in his professional and personal life, all sitting at one long table. Professor Hartman, the board members, Victoria Hartwell, his biggest competitor. What was she doing here? And at the head of the table, composed and devastating in crimson, Greta. Hello, Daniel, she said. We've been waiting for you. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. Daniel's mind went blank. Then it raced. Then it simply couldn't process what he was seeing. Everyone he knew, everyone who mattered, all of them sitting in this room, looking at him with expressions ranging from confusion to something that looked horribly like pity. Greta, what is this? His voice came out wrong. Too high, too uncertain. He cleared his throat, tried again. What's going on? Sit down, Daniel. She gestured to an empty chair near the middle of the table, positioned perfectly so everyone could see his face. We have a lot to discuss. I don't understand. I'm having dinner. I need to... Sit down, Thomas said, and the steel in his voice made Daniel move to the chair automatically, legs obeying before his brain could process. His mother wouldn't look at him. His father's face was stone. His siblings looked confused and worried. What the hell was happening? Greta stood, and the room went quiet. She looked around the table, made eye contact with each person, then smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly. Just the smile of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and couldn't be stopped. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know you're confused, so I'll be direct. I asked you here tonight because I have an announcement about my family, and I wanted the people who matter most to Daniel and me to hear it firsthand. Not from lawyers, not from the media, from me. She pressed a button on her phone, and a screen descended from the ceiling behind her. A projector clicked on. 4 days ago, our son Charles was admitted to Manhattan General Hospital with a fever of 40.3 degrees Celsius. The doctors were concerned about potential febrile seizures. He was asking for his father. The screen showed a hospital report, time-stamped and official. Charles Andrews Lewis, age 9, admitted at 11:52 p.m. Medical details. Doctor's notes about a frightened child asking repeatedly where his father was, becoming increasingly agitated as the fever climbed higher. I called my husband 31 times that night. Greta's voice was steady, factual, empty of emotion. He didn't answer once. I texted him. No response. Our son was in a hospital bed, possibly facing a seizure that could have caused permanent brain damage, and I had no way to reach his father. Daniel felt every eye in the room turn to him. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but his throat had closed. His mother's hand went to her mouth. I was confused about where Daniel might be at midnight on a Thursday, so I did what any concerned wife would do. I checked social media. The screen changed. Judy Foster's Instagram story filled the wall. The Carlisle Hotel ballroom, golden and glittering, a party, champagne, and there, clear as day, time-stamped at midnight. Daniel kissing Judy, his hand on her waist, smiling like a man without a care in the world. The video played. Daniel could hear the music, could hear people laughing, could hear Judy saying, "Make a wish, baby," as he leaned in to kiss her. Someone gasped. Daniel's mother made a sound like she'd been struck. His sister Jennifer whispered, "Oh my God." That's Daniel's mistress, Judy Foster. 29 years old, event coordinator. Last night was her birthday party. Apparently, that took priority over our son's medical emergency. The room erupted in murmurs. Daniel tried to stand, tried to speak, but Thomas's hand on his shoulder pushed him back down with surprising force. "Greta, please, this isn't what it looks like. I'm not finished." Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "This might be easier for everyone to process with context, so let me provide some." The screen changed again. Financial records, bank statements, credit card receipts, all of it time-stamped, organized, damning. Color-coded spreadsheets that made the theft crystal clear. Over the past 18 months, Daniel has moved $3.2 million from our joint investment accounts into a separate personal account I wasn't aware of. That account has been used to pay for 62 hotel stays, always on nights when Judy Foster was in the same city. Thomas's face went white. Several board members leaned forward, their expressions hardening. One of them, Harrison, was already pulling out his phone. Daniel has also been paying $15,000 monthly for an apartment lease in Judy Foster's name. He purchased jewelry totaling over $200,000 that I've never seen, and all of this was charged to his corporate card. "Jesus Christ," Thomas whispered. Greta continued relentlessly. "Company resources used for personal expenses violate the ethics clause in every client contract Lewis Enterprises holds, but that's a professional matter. Let's return to the personal." She pressed another button. Daniel's voice filled the room, slurred and unmistakable. "I can't wait to finally be free. Once Charles is older, custody won't be as complicated. Another few years and I can actually start living my real life, the life I deserve, not this pretend family man act I've been putting on." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear people breathing. Someone's phone vibrated against the table. Daniel's mother stood up, walked out of the room without a word. Two of his siblings followed her. His father didn't move, just kept staring at Daniel like he was looking at a stranger. Jennifer, his sister, the one who'd always defended him, started crying quietly. "That voicemail was sent to Judy Foster 2 months ago," Greta said quietly. "My husband has been planning his escape from our family while smiling at me over breakfast. While reading bedtime stories to a son he apparently views as an obstacle to his happiness. While accepting praise for being a devoted family man. While I proposed renewing our vows yesterday morning, he was probably texting her, planning their next rendezvous." She paused, let it all sink in, then delivered the final blow. "I filed for divorce. I've also filed a civil suit against Lewis Enterprises for misappropriation of marital assets and misuse of corporate funds. Every joint account has been frozen pending litigation. I've requested primary physical custody of Charles with supervised visitation for Daniel, and my lawyers are confident that will be granted based on the evidence of abandonment and questionable judgment." Thomas stood so fast, his chair fell backward with a crash that made everyone jump. "You charged your affair to the company card. Are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Thomas, let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been using our business to fund your mistress. Do you have any idea what this does to us? We have ethics clauses in every contract. We could lose everything because you couldn't keep your dick in your pants. Everything we built, Daniel. Everything." "Mr. Wright is correct," said one of the board members, an older man named Harrison. "This is grounds for immediate termination. We'll need to call an emergency meeting. Tonight, if possible." Victoria Hartwell, the Meridian Group CEO, hadn't spoken yet. She sat at the far end of the table, watching everything with sharp, calculating eyes. Greta had invited her for a reason. Hartwell was about to see Lewis Enterprises' greatest vulnerability, Daniel himself. Greta let the chaos build for a moment, then raised her hand for silence. The room quieted immediately. She had their complete attention. "There's one more thing you should know. I've accepted a position as Senior Strategic Advisor to Meridian Group. I start Monday." The room went silent again. Thomas actually laughed, but it was the laugh of someone who'd just realized they were ruined. "That's our biggest competitor," he said, his voice flat with disbelief. "I know." Greta looked directly at Daniel. "For 12 years, I've been the strategic mind behind Lewis Enterprises' success. Every major acquisition strategy, every client retention framework, every operational efficiency that made this company profitable. I developed them, I advised Daniel, and he presented them as his own work. He took credit for my ideas in boardrooms, in interviews, in industry publications, never once mentioning my name, never once saying thank you." "That's not true," Daniel finally found his voice. "You helped, but—" "Show of hands," Greta interrupted. "How many people in this room have been in meetings where Daniel pitched a strategy he claimed was entirely his concept, but that he'd mentioned over dinner the night before actually came from our conversations, from my frameworks, from my analysis?" Thomas's hand went up slowly, then another board member's, then another, then Professor Hartman, looking sick. Greta smiled. "I'm not claiming I built Lewis Enterprises alone, but I am saying that the person everyone thinks is a brilliant strategist has been taking credit for someone else's work for 12 years. And now that someone else is going to work for your competition, so you can decide what that means for your company's future." She gathered her things, preparing to leave, when a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. Raised voices, someone shouting, a waiter trying to intervene. The door burst open. Judy Foster stood there, flanked by a confused waiter, her white dress and wild eyes making her look like a beautiful ghost. "Daniel, what the hell is going on? You've been gone for 20 minutes, and then someone told me there was some kind of meeting." She stopped, seeing the room, seeing Greta, seeing all the faces staring at her, understanding blooming across her face like a flower opening to poison. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, this is bad." "Miss Foster." Greta's voice was pleasant, conversational. "Perfect timing. I was just explaining to everyone what my husband has been doing for the past 18 months. Would you like to add anything?" Judy looked at Daniel, who couldn't meet her eyes, then back at Greta. "I didn't know he was married at first. When I found out, he said you two were separated, that it was basically over, that you were just staying together for your son until he was older, that you just hadn't filed papers yet because of some business thing. And you believed him." "I wanted to believe him. He was so convincing. He said you didn't understand him, that you'd grown apart, that he'd made a mistake marrying you." Daniel's father made a sound of disgust. "Of course you did. Tell me something, Miss Foster. The apartment Daniel's been paying for? The one with the $15,000 monthly lease? I've frozen all his accounts. So effective tomorrow, you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Do you have savings?" Judy's face went pale. "What? You can't?" "I can, and I have. Do you have savings?" No, I thought," Daniel said. "I didn't think so. Daniel, you might want to figure out where your girlfriend is going to sleep, since you apparently can't afford to help her anymore, though I suspect you'll have trouble affording much of anything soon." Greta walked toward the door. Judy scrambled backward to get out of her way, nearly tripping over her own feet. As Greta passed, she paused, looked at the younger woman and said quietly, "He'll do to you what he did to me. Eventually. Men who lie like this don't change. They just find new people to lie to. You'll be replaced the moment someone younger and easier comes along." She walked out of Marcus without looking back, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Behind her, chaos erupted. Daniel tried to follow, but his father blocked his path with an outstretched arm, and Daniel had never seen that look on his father's face before. Thomas was shouting about emergency board meetings and damage control. Judy was crying, saying she didn't know. Board members were making urgent phone calls. Victoria Hartwell was smiling. Daniel Lewis stood in the center of it all, watching everything he'd built crumble, and realized too late that he'd never built anything at all. He'd just been holding what someone else created and pretending it was his. And now, she'd taken it all back. Chapter 6. The Empire's Collapse. Saturday morning arrived with the mercy of a hammer. Daniel woke in a hotel room he'd checked into at 2 in the morning after being physically removed from Marcus by his own father, who'd gripped his arm hard enough to bruise and said, "Don't come home. Don't call your mother. Just go." His phone had 400 notifications. He ignored them all and stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how his life had become unrecognizable in the span of 3 hours. By Saturday afternoon, he couldn't ignore reality anymore. Thomas called. No greeting, just, "Board meeting Monday at 8 a.m. Your presence is mandatory. Bring a lawyer, a good one." His mother sent a text. "Do not contact me until you figure out what kind of man you want to be. The one I raised would never do what you've done." His brother Marcus sent a voice message, and Daniel could hear him crying. "Charles called me yesterday. Asked if I was going to stop loving him like Daddy did. He's 9 years old, Daniel. 9. And he thinks his father stopped loving him. You're going to explain that to me in person, and if I don't like your explanation, we're done. Blood or not." His sister Jennifer sent a text. "How could you? How could you do this to her? To Charles? I defended you to everyone. I told them you were a good man. I was wrong." But the worst was the email from his company attorney. Subject line, "Immediate action required, client contract violations." 3 of Lewis Enterprises' largest clients had terminated their contracts overnight, not because of the affair, because their agreements contained morality clauses specifically prohibiting use of company resources for personal benefit. Daniel, charging his affair to corporate cards, violated those clauses. The company faced potential lawsuits for breach of contract. The financial damages could run into tens of millions. The financial damage would be catastrophic. Daniel tried to access his bank accounts to figure out what resources he had left. Every joint account showed frozen, pending litigation. His personal checking account had $42,000. His credit cards linked to joint accounts were declined. His corporate card had been cancelled overnight. He called his lawyer, a man named Patterson who'd handled his business contracts for years. The conversation lasted 17 minutes and ended with Patterson saying, "Daniel, the prenuptial agreement your wife signed 12 years ago has a clause you need to understand. In cases of proven infidelity with asset misappropriation, she retains primary ownership of jointly acquired assets. That means the penthouse, the Hampton house, most of your investment portfolio. You're about to lose almost everything, and frankly, given what I've seen in the evidence her lawyers provided, you're lucky she's not going after more." "That can't be right. My lawyer reviewed that prenup." "Your lawyer at the time was focused on protecting your future earnings, not understanding what your wife already owned. She used her consulting income for the down payment on the penthouse. She funded most of the Hampton house purchase. Her financial advisor structured your investment portfolio. You thought you were rich, Daniel, but you were living off your wife's money while taking credit for her strategies, and now she's taking it all back, as she has every legal right to do." Monday morning, Daniel walked into Lewis Enterprises headquarters feeling like a ghost visiting his own life. Security made him sign in as a visitor. His key card didn't work. When he reached the executive floor, his office door was locked, his name already removed from the placard. Someone had done that over the weekend. That fast. The board meeting was held in the main conference room. Daniel sat at the table where he'd sat 100 times before, where he'd presented strategies and closed deals and been celebrated, but now every face looked at him with cold assessment. Thomas started without preamble. "Daniel Lewis, this board has reviewed evidence of ethical violations including misuse of corporate funds, misrepresentation of strategic work product, and conduct detrimental to company reputation and fiduciary responsibility. We're voting today on immediate termination of your employment and removal from the board. You can't do this. I built this company. I'm the CEO. Harrison, the senior board member, laughed bitterly. Did you? Because according to documents your wife provided, along with testimony from multiple sources including your own executive assistant, every major strategic initiative for our first 8 years came from her consulting work. Work you presented as your own, work you claimed credit for in interviews and industry publications. She was my wife. We collaborated. That's what married people do. Married people don't claim sole credit for their spouse's work, Thomas said, and his voice was shaking with rage. Married people don't charge affairs to company accounts. Married people don't abandon their sick children. You've done all of those things, and now we're dealing with the consequences. Do you know what's happening right now? Our phones won't stop ringing. Clients demanding answers, press asking for statements, board members from other companies calling to tell us they're reconsidering partnerships. You've destroyed our reputation in one night. The vote was unanimous. Daniel Lewis was terminated as CEO effective immediately. His equity vested, but he was barred from any leadership roles. Thomas Wright became acting CEO. We'll need your key card, your company phone, and your laptop, Harrison said. Security will escort you out. And Daniel, don't try to contact anyone at this company. We've been advised by legal to have no communication with you outside of official channels. Daniel sat in stunned silence. Then anger surged, hot and desperate. You're making a mistake. Without me, this company falls apart. Without you, Thomas said quietly, and his voice was ice, this company might actually start operating with integrity again. Without you, we might actually retain the clients your behavior is costing us. Get out, Daniel, and don't come back. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Daniel stood, dignity stripped, and walked out of the company he thought he'd built, escorted like a criminal past colleagues who wouldn't meet his eyes. Past Maya, who he'd worked with for 5 years, who kept her eyes on her computer screen as he passed. Past the young associates who used to look up to him, who now whispered to each other behind their hands. In the lobby, he passed Maya on her way back from lunch, his former executive assistant. She didn't acknowledge him, just kept walking, head high, like he didn't exist. Outside, Daniel stood on the sidewalk watching people flow past. Rush hour in Manhattan, everyone moving with purpose, heading somewhere, being someone. He was 41 years old and suddenly had nowhere to go. His phone buzzed. Greta's lawyer, custody hearing scheduled for Thursday. Your supervised visitation request will be reviewed. Bring character references if you can find anyone willing to vouch for you. Character references. Who did he have left? His parents weren't speaking to him. His siblings had gone silent or actively hostile. Thomas hated him. His friends had seen the Instagram evidence and disappeared. Professor Hartman had sent one text. I'm deeply disappointed. I thought I knew you better. He tried calling Judy. No answer. Tried again. Voicemail. A third time, and she finally picked up. Stop calling me. Judy, we need to talk. This is all just a misunderstanding. Let me explain. Explain what? That you lied about being separated? That you used company money for everything? That I'm about to be evicted because you got all your accounts frozen? Her voice was sharp with betrayal, but underneath it he could hear fear. I looked you up, Daniel. Found articles about your net worth, your success. You told me you were a billionaire. You told me we could travel the world. You told me you'd take care of me. Turns out that was your wife's money. It's our money, marital assets. Not anymore. Your wife made that very clear. And you know what? She was right about you. You'll do to anyone what you did to her. Judy laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. You told me I was special, that we had something real. But you were just using me to feel important because apparently your actual life wasn't enough. Your actual family wasn't enough. That's not true. Yes, it is. And you know what the worst part is? I actually started to care about you. Thought maybe this was real. Thought maybe I'd found someone who actually loved me. But you're not real, Daniel. You're just a man who got caught. Just another liar who got caught. She hung up. Daniel tried calling back. Number blocked. He walked 12 blocks to the apartment building where Judy lived, the one he'd been paying for with money that apparently wasn't his. The doorman stopped him at the entrance. "Sorry, sir. Miss Foster left instructions. You're not allowed up. I just need to talk to her for 5 minutes, please." "Sir, if you don't leave, I'll call the police. Miss Foster was very clear." Daniel left, walked another 20 blocks in no particular direction, his mind replaying the disaster at Marcus over and over. Found himself outside Charles's school at dismissal time, watched parents pick up their children, watched his own son walk out holding Greta's hand. Charles looked happy, lighter, like some weight had been lifted. He was laughing at something Greta said. He didn't even look for his father's car. Daniel's phone buzzed again. His hotel. "Mr. Lewis, we need to discuss your extended stay charges. Your credit card on file was declined." He'd been staying at the Four Seasons for the past 4 days, $500 a night. He checked his bank balance. After hotel charges and some automatic payments he'd forgotten about, his personal account was down to $38,000. That sounded like a lot until you remembered it was all he had, and child support would be $8,400 monthly. That gave him 4 months before he was broke. He found a cheaper hotel, extended stay place on the edge of Manhattan, $200 a night. Still too much, but everything in this city was too much when you suddenly had nothing. That night, Daniel sat in his generic hotel room and finally let himself feel it. The loss, the humiliation, the complete dissolution of the life he'd known. He opened his laptop and searched his own name. The first result: Tech CEO Daniel Lewis terminated amid affair scandal and ethics violations. Wife takes strategic mind to competitor. The second, strategic mastermind Greta Andrews joins. Meridian Group, competitor gains industry's most valuable consultant. The articles were brutal. They detailed the affair, the frozen assets, the company termination, but they also revealed something Daniel had never wanted to acknowledge: Greta's brilliance, her track record, her consulting firm that had quietly advised some of the most successful women-owned businesses in the country. Testimonials from clients praising her strategic vision. Analysis from industry experts calling her one of the most underrated strategic minds in business. She'd never needed him. He'd just been too self-absorbed to notice, too busy taking credit for her work to see that she was the brilliant one, that he was just the pretty face presenting her ideas. Daniel's phone rang. Unknown number, he answered, desperate for any human contact. "Mr. Lewis, this is Henderson Properties. We're calling about your penthouse. Mrs. Andrews has initiated sale proceedings. You'll need to vacate within 30 days. "She can't sell the penthouse. I live there." "According to property records, Mrs. Andrews holds primary ownership. The sale is legal and already in progress. We have multiple interested buyers. You'll receive your required notice formally, but we wanted to give you advance warning to begin making arrangements." Daniel hung up, stared at the hotel room walls, realized he was about to be homeless. Not literally. He had money for a rental somewhere, but homeless in the way that mattered, without a home, without family, without identity, without the life he'd known. He thought about that Instagram post, the kiss at midnight, the party that had seemed so important, so validating, so necessary for his happiness. If he could go back, would he answer Greta's calls? Would he rush to the hospital? Would he choose differently? The honest answer terrified him. He didn't know, because the man who'd ignored those calls had been him, not some temporary madness or momentary lapse. Just Daniel Lewis making the choices Daniel Lewis made when no one was watching, and now Daniel Lewis had to live with the consequences. His phone buzzed one more time. Judy's number, but not a call. A social media notification: Judy Foster is now in a relationship. Daniel clicked through, already knowing what he'd see. Judy with another man. Older, distinguished, clearly wealthy. The silver-haired man from the restaurant, posted 3 hours ago with the caption, "When one door closes, a better one opens." She'd already moved on. Everyone had already moved on. Except Daniel, who sat alone in a cheap hotel room, finally understanding what his father had tried to tell him years ago when he'd caught Daniel cheating on a college girlfriend. Success means nothing if you destroy everything good to get it. He'd destroyed everything good, and there was no one left to blame but himself. Chapter 7. The Son's Truth. 3 weeks after the dinner at Marcus, Daniel finally received approval for supervised visitation. 1 hour, Saturday afternoon. Family Services Center on 32nd Street. A court-appointed supervisor would be present. He was not to discuss the divorce with Charles. He was not to ask about Greta. He was to simply spend time with his son, under the watchful eyes of strangers who existed to protect the boy from him, from his own father. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, wearing one of his expensive suits, even though it hung on him now, having lost 19 pounds since his world imploded. The center was institutional and sad, filled with other broken families negotiating their broken relationships in carefully monitored increments. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of industrial cleaner hung in the air. Motivational posters on the walls said things like, "Every journey begins with a single step," and "Communication is the key to healing." He sat in the waiting area and watched a father play checkers with a daughter who wouldn't look at him. The girl was maybe 7, focusing intently on the game board like it was the most important thing in the world. The father kept trying to make conversation. She gave one-word answers. Daniel could see the man's desperation, the way he checked the clock every few minutes. Watched another parent arrive late, clearly drunk, get turned away by staff while a small boy cried in the corner. This was his life now, this sterile room, these desperate hours, this proof of failure. At exactly 2 o'clock the door opened and Charles walked in holding a social worker's hand. He wore his soccer uniform, shin guards and cleats and grass stains on both knees. He looked taller than Daniel remembered. When had that happened? How many growth spurts had Daniel missed while he was at hotels with Judy? "Hi, buddy." Daniel's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "You have a game today." "Already played. We won." Charles sat in the chair across from Daniel. The social worker, a woman named Ms. Patterson, took a seat in the corner with a clipboard, pen poised. "That's great. How many goals?" 2. "Wow, that's amazing. I bet the other team didn't know what hit them." Charles shrugged. Silence filled the space between them like a physical presence. Daniel tried again. "Your mom said you've been doing well in school." "Yeah." "Any favorite subjects?" "Science." More silence. Charles looked at the clock on the wall. They'd been together for 3 minutes, and he was already checking how much time was left. Daniel felt something break inside his chest. "Charles, I know this is weird. I know things have been confusing. But I want you to know I love you. Nothing's changed that." Charles finally looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes were Greta's eyes, dark and assessing and old beyond their years. "Everything changed." "What do you mean?" "That night I was sick. I kept asking Mom where you were. She said you were at work, but her voice sounded wrong, like when she's trying not to cry. I knew she was lying to protect you. I'm not stupid, Dad. I knew something was wrong." Daniel's throat closed. He wanted to speak, but couldn't. "At the hospital, I woke up once and saw her in the chair next to my bed. She wasn't sleeping. She was just staring at her phone. I thought she was texting you, but she wasn't. She was just holding it like she was trying to decide something. Her hands were shaking." The silence was unbearable. "The next morning, Uncle Marcus picked us up from the hospital. You weren't home. You didn't even know we'd been gone all night, did you?" "Charles, I didn't know you were sick. If I had known..." "Mum called you 31 times. Daniel froze. "How do you know that?" "I saw the call log on her phone. 31 calls. You didn't answer any of them." Charles leaned forward slightly. His hands were clasped in his lap, and Daniel noticed they were trembling. "Were you really at work?" Daniel couldn't speak, couldn't lie. Not to those eyes, not anymore. "I heard Uncle Marcus and Mom talking. He asked her if she wanted him to go find you and bring you to the hospital. She said no. She said you'd made your choice." Charles's voice was steady, but something underneath it was breaking. "What choice did you make, Dad? What was more important than me being sick? It's complicated, buddy. I'm 9, not stupid. The words hit like a slap. Daniel had said that exact phrase to his own father countless times growing up. Now here was his son, throwing it back at him, demanding the truth nobody wanted to give, the cycle repeating, history echoing. "You're right," Daniel said quietly. "You're not stupid, and you deserve the truth. I made a terrible choice that night. I was somewhere I shouldn't have been, with someone I shouldn't have been with, and I ignored your mother's calls because I was being selfish and irresponsible. There's no excuse for it. I failed you. I failed you as a father, and I'm so sorry." Charles was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Trevor at school said his parents got divorced last year because his dad had another family. He said it hurt at first, but now it's better because his dad is happier. Are you happier now, Dad?" The question was so genuine, so heartbreaking in its childish hope, that Daniel wanted to die, to simply cease existing rather than face this moment. "No," he said honestly, "I'm not." "Then why did you do it?" How do you explain weakness to a child? How do you explain that you felt invisible in your own life, that your ego needed feeding, that you confused attention with love and validation with worth? How do you tell your 9-year-old that you destroyed everything because you were too cowardly to admit you were unhappy, too weak to work on your problems, too selfish to think about anyone but yourself? "I don't have a good answer," Daniel said. "I was confused. I felt lost. But instead of talking to your mum about it, instead of working on our problems together, I ran away from them. I made choices that hurt everyone I love, and I can't take them back. I wish I could, but I can't." Charles nodded, slowly processing. "Mom says you were a good dad once, before everything. I don't really remember that. I just remember the last year when you were always on your phone or coming home late or looking annoyed when I wanted to show you stuff. Like when I made that volcano for science fair and you said you'd help but you never did. Mom helped me instead." The words landed like physical blows. Daniel remembered that. Remembered promising to help with the volcano, then getting distracted by texts from Judy, by planning their next meeting, by everything except his son. "So I don't think I lost the dad I knew. I think I lost him a long time ago, and I just didn't realize it until everyone else did. Until Mum told me what happened." Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Charles, It's okay, Dad." Charles's voice was gentle, mature beyond his years, and that somehow made it worse. "Mom explained that sometimes people change. Sometimes they become different than who they were. You're just different now, and that's not my fault. It's absolutely not your fault. None of this is your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. I know. Mom made sure I knew that. She explained that grown-ups make their own choices, and kids don't cause those choices. She took me to see a therapist, Dr. Martinez. She's nice. She says it's okay to be angry at you." "Are you angry?" "Sometimes. Mostly I'm just sad." Charles glanced at the clock again. 43 minutes had passed. "Can I go? I have soccer practice. Coach says if I keep improving, I might make the travel team next year." "Already? We still have time." "I know, but I don't really have anything else to say, and I don't want to just sit here being sad. Coach says soccer helps me feel better, so I want to go to practice." Miss Patterson looked up from her notes, waited for Daniel's response. "Of course," Daniel managed. "You should go to practice. That's great about the travel team. I'm proud of you." "Thanks." Charles stood, gathered his backpack, started to leave, then turned back one more time. "Dad, that night at the hospital when I was really sick, I had this dream. I dreamed you came running in like a superhero and made everything okay. When I woke up and you weren't there, Mum told me you were handling important work stuff. She made it sound like you were saving the world or something." Daniel felt tears burn behind his eyes. "But you weren't saving the world. You were just kissing someone who wasn't Mum." Charles's voice was matter-of-fact, not accusing, just stating truth. "So I guess the superhero dad from my dream isn't real. And that's okay. Not every kid gets a superhero dad. Dr. Martinez says lots of kids have dads who disappoint them. Some kids just get regular dads who mess up." He walked to the door. Miss Patterson stood to escort him out. "Charles!" Daniel called. His son turned back. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know," Charles said. "But sorry doesn't make you answer the phone, does it? Sorry doesn't make you show up when people need you." Then he was gone. Daniel sat alone in that room for 27 minutes, unable to move, unable to think, unable to be anything except a man watching his son walk away. The other families had left. The staff was cleaning up. Only Miss Patterson remained, giving him space. She finally approached. "Mr. Lewis, your hour is up. You'll need to vacate the room." "Did I lose him?" Daniel asked. "Tell me honestly. Did I lose my son?" Miss Patterson considered him with professional compassion. "You didn't lose him, Mr. Lewis, but you'll need to earn him back. And that will take a lot more than supervised hours in this room. That will take becoming someone he can respect again." Daniel stood on shaking legs. "And if I can't? If I don't know how?" "Then you figure it out, because that boy deserves better than what you gave him, and children have long memories, Mr. Lewis. They remember who showed up and who didn't. Right now, you're the father who didn't. The question is whether you become something different." Daniel left the Family Services Center and walked aimlessly for hours. His phone buzzed with a notification: next approved visitation in 2 weeks. Same time, same place, same restrictions. 2 weeks to figure out what to say to a 9-year-old who saw through every lie and deserved every truth. 2 weeks to become someone worth respecting. Daniel looked at his reflection in a shop window. Saw a stranger in expensive clothes that no longer fit. Saw a man who'd had everything and traded it for nothing. Saw a father who'd chosen a birthday party over his son's medical emergency. Saw his father's son after all. Just not the father he'd wanted to be. Chapter 8. The mirror sleep became theoretical. Daniel would lie in his hotel bed. He'd moved to an extended stay place charging $140 a night and watch ceiling shadows until dawn. He'd lost 19 pounds. His suits hung on him like borrowed clothes. Waiters who used to recognize him now looked past him like furniture. The world had decided he was invisible. 5 weeks after that dinner at Marcus, Daniel's life had been reduced to waiting. Waiting for lawyers to call, waiting for supervised visitation appointments, waiting for this nightmare to end, even though he was starting to understand it wasn't a nightmare. It was just his life now. This was reality. This was the consequence of his choices. Monday morning, he met with Patterson, his lawyer, to discuss the divorce settlement. "They're offering you generous terms, all things considered," Patterson said, sliding papers across his desk. "She gets primary physical custody with supervised visitation for you, gradually increasing to unsupervised if you demonstrate consistent engagement and responsible behavior. You'll pay child support of $8,400 monthly. She retains the penthouse and Hampton House, 70% of investment accounts. You keep your personal checking vested stock options from the company, which have already lost significant value due to the scandal, and one investment property upstate that frankly isn't worth much." Daniel scanned the numbers. "This leaves me with less than $200,000 in liquid assets. You violated the prenuptial agreement. She could have taken everything. This is mercy, Daniel. Pure mercy. Do you understand that?" "Mercy," Daniel repeated hollowly. "Sign it, Daniel. Fighting this will cost more than you'll gain, and every day in litigation is another day you don't get to see your son unsupervised. Every day is another day Charles learns to live without you. Is that what you want?" Daniel signed. What choice did he have? Tuesday, his father's birthday. Daniel sent a text. "Happy birthday, Dad. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm thinking of you. I love you." No response. He called. Voicemail. He left a message. "Dad, it's Daniel. I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. I'm sorry. For everything. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Call me if you want, or don't. I understand." His father never called back. He drove to his parents' house in Westchester, the house where he'd grown up, where family dinners happened every Sunday, where his mother still kept his childhood bedroom exactly as he'd left it. Or had kept it. Maybe she'd changed it now. Erased him. His mother answered the door, saw him, and said 6 words. "We have nothing to say, Daniel." "Mom, please." "I just want to talk. Just 5 minutes." "About what?" "About how you abandoned your son when he needed you. About how you humiliated your wife in front of everyone who matters. About how you used company money to fund your affair." Her voice was ice. "You embarrassed this family. You destroyed your own family. And until you understand the magnitude of what you've done, we have nothing to discuss." "I do understand. I know I messed up." "Messed up? You think this is a mess up? Like forgetting to take out the trash? You betrayed everyone who loved you. You threw away a good woman for some girl who's already replaced you. You ignored your sick child, and you did it all while lying to everyone." The door closed. Daniel stood there for a moment, then tried the doorbell again. His father answered this time. "Daniel, your mother asked you to leave." "Dad, please. I need to talk to someone. I need help." "You need help? Where was our help when you needed us? When did you call us? When did you ask for advice or support?" "You didn't. You just lied and cheated and destroyed everything. We raised you better than this." "I know, you did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't mean anything without change. Come back when you've changed. Until then, stay away." His father closed the door, and this time Daniel heard the lock click. Daniel stood on the porch where he'd played as a child, where he'd brought Greta home to meet his parents 12 years ago, where they'd celebrated Charles's first birthday. He was locked out of his own history. Wednesday, Daniel got a job. Not a job, the job. Consulting position at a mid-level marketing firm. Salary of $73,000 annually. His new boss, Carson, was 32 years old and wore sneakers to meetings and called everyone by abbreviated nicknames Daniel didn't understand. "Great to have you on the team, Danny." "It's Daniel." "Danny's friendlier. We're pretty casual here. You'll fit right in once you lose the tie." Daniel had made more than $73,000 in a single week at Lewis Enterprises. Now it was his annual salary, and he was being called Danny by someone young enough to be his intern, someone who'd probably never heard of Lewis Enterprises or Daniel's supposed brilliance. But he needed the money. Child support was due in 2 weeks. Hotel costs were mounting. His credit cards were maxed because he'd stopped paying attention to spending after the asset freeze. He took the job, smiled, said thank you, pretended to be grateful. Thursday, the Wall Street Journal published a profile, how Greta Andrews built 2 empires and only got credit for one. Daniel read it twice, each word a fresh wound. The article detailed Greta's consulting career, her strategic frameworks that had helped launch dozens of successful businesses, her quiet brilliance that had been overshadowed by her husband's public persona. It included quotes from former clients praising her insight, from business professors analyzing her methodologies, from Meridian Group's CEO celebrating their acquisition of the industry's most valuable strategic mind. One client said, "Greta Andrews is the smartest person I've ever worked with. She sees patterns no one else sees. She solves problems before they become crises. Working with her transformed my business." Another, "I always wondered why Lewis Enterprises was so successful. Now I know. It wasn't Daniel Lewis. It was her." Daniel was mentioned once. Her ex-husband, former Lewis Enterprises CEO Daniel Lewis, often presented collaborative work as solely his achievement, according to multiple sources familiar with their working relationship. Former CEO, ex-husband, often presented. The article reduced 12 years of marriage and a decade of career to one dismissive sentence. And it wasn't even wrong. Friday, Daniel saw Judy. Not intentionally. He was grabbing coffee near his new office when he spotted her through a restaurant window, sitting across from a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive watch. The man from her Instagram. The man was laughing at something Judy said. She was leaning forward, animated, engaged. Wearing a dress Daniel had never seen, probably bought with the new boyfriend's money. Looking happy in a way she'd never looked with him. Or maybe she had looked that happy and he just hadn't noticed because he'd been too busy feeling validated by her attention. Daniel watched for 30 seconds, then left without getting his coffee. He stood outside the restaurant for a moment, wondering if she'd see him. She didn't. She was too focused on her new life. He walked away. Saturday, he finally broke. Alone in his hotel room, surrounded by boxes of belongings from the penthouse, Daniel opened one he'd been avoiding. Inside, framed photos, wedding albums, mementos from a life that felt like it had belonged to someone else. There was a photo from Charles's 3rd birthday, Daniel holding him, both of them covered in chocolate cake, laughing. He couldn't remember the last time Charles had laughed like that around him. Couldn't remember when his son had stopped looking at him with uncomplicated love. When had that changed? When had Daniel stopped being the dad in that photo? There was his old journal, leather-bound and forgotten. He'd kept it religiously in his 20s, then sporadically in his 30s, then not at all once success made introspection feel unnecessary. Once he'd decided he'd figured everything out. He flipped to an entry from 11 years ago, Charles's birth. His handwriting was rushed, excited, barely legible. Held my son for the first time today. He's so small, so perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a whole person who didn't exist yesterday, and now he's here. Greta looked at me and said we made someone who's going to be better than both of us. I promised her, promised him, I would be the father I never had. Present, honest, worth looking up to. I promised I would never let him question whether he was loved. I'm going to be there for every moment, every birthday, every soccer game, every scraped knee. I'm going to be the dad who shows up. Daniel read it 3 times. Each word was a knife, each promise a betrayal. He'd promised, and he'd failed, not spectacularly, not all at once, just gradually, day by day, choice by choice, until the man who wrote that entry disappeared completely. Where had he gone? That Daniel who'd held his newborn son and made promises about presence and honesty. That Daniel who'd looked at Greta like she'd hung the stars. That Daniel who'd actually believed he could be good. When had checking his phone become more important than listening to his son's stories? When had late nights at the office become late nights with someone else? When had he stopped being grateful for what he had and started resenting what he thought he deserved? Daniel's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, desperate for any human contact. Daniel, it's Greta. His heart stopped. Greta. Hi. I've been wanting to talk to you. I'm calling because Charles asked me to. He wants to know if you're okay. Not because he misses you, because he's worried you might do something desperate, and he says he doesn't want that on his conscience. He's 9 years old and he's worried about his father's mental health. Do you understand how wrong that is? The words hit like a physical blow. His 9-year-old son was worried about him, was mature enough to separate his own hurt from concern for another person's well-being, was carrying the burden of his father's choices. That's very mature of him. He's more mature than either of us, Daniel. He's processing this better than we are. He's in therapy, he's doing well in school, he's making friends. Which says something, doesn't it? That our son is handling our divorce better than we are. Silence stretched between them. Are you okay? Greta asked. Her voice was clinical, distant, the voice of someone checking a box. I'm fine. Good. I'll tell Charles. Try to actually be fine, Daniel, for his sake. He doesn't need the guilt of worrying about you on top of everything else you've put him through. Greta, wait. What? Say something. Apologize. Explain. Beg her to understand. Tell her you know you were wrong. Tell her you miss her. Tell her you miss the life you had. But what was there to say that hadn't already been said in divorce papers and frozen accounts and supervised visitation orders? Nothing. Tell Charles I'm okay. Tell him I love him. I will. She hung up. Daniel sat with the phone in his hand, staring at that journal entry about promises to a newborn. His son was worried about him, was checking on him through his mother because direct contact felt too hard. A 9-year-old was more emotionally mature than his father. That truth settled into Daniel's bones and stayed there. He spent the rest of the weekend alone, confronting what he'd spent 5 weeks avoiding. He didn't miss Judy, hadn't thought about her except when forced to. She'd been validation, not love, attention, not connection, a distraction from problems he didn't want to face. He didn't miss the CEO position, didn't miss the power or the prestige. He missed feeling important, but he was starting to realize he'd only felt important because Greta had made him important. She'd been the strategist. He'd just been the presenter. He didn't even miss his old life. Not really. He missed not knowing how badly he'd failed, missed the ignorance that had let him believe he was a good man making understandable mistakes. But he wasn't a good man making understandable mistakes. He was a weak man who'd chosen comfort over courage, validation over integrity, and his own ego over everyone who loved him. And now everyone who loved him was gone. His phone buzzed. A notification from Charles's school portal. Greta had added him with limited access. He could see grades and attendance but couldn't change anything. Couldn't sign permission slips. Couldn't be listed as an emergency contact. Charles had gotten an A on his science project, How Different Temperatures Affect Bacteria Growth. The teacher's note said, Charles showed exceptional research skills and real passion for the subject. His mother had helped him understand the scientific method. There was a photo of Charles standing next to his project board, smiling proudly. Daniel hadn't even known there was a science fair, hadn't known Charles was working on a project, hadn't been invited to attend. He read the note 3 times. He didn't know Charles loved science, didn't know what projects he was working on, didn't know his favorite subject or his friends' names or what he did after school or what he wanted to be when he grew up. He was a stranger to his own son, and whose fault was that? Daniel closed his laptop, looked around his hotel room at the ruins of his life, thought about that journal entry, about promises made to a newborn, about the man he'd sworn he would be. That man was gone, dead, killed by 1,000 small choices that had seemed insignificant at the time. But maybe he could become someone else, someone better. Not the man he'd been, but someone his son could respect. Someone who answered calls, someone who showed up, someone who earned back what he'd thrown away. Or maybe it was too late for that. Maybe some things, once broken, stayed broken forever. Daniel didn't know. But sitting alone in that hotel room, he finally understood what Greta had tried to tell him months ago, with her silence, with her distance. Sorry wasn't enough. Regret wasn't enough. Understanding wasn't enough. Only change was enough, only becoming different, only proving through action, not words, that he could be better. And Daniel Lewis didn't know if he was capable of that, but for Charles, he had to try. Chapter 9. The Final Fall. 2 months after the dinner that ended his life, Daniel Lewis started his new job at Precision Marketing Solutions. The office was in a building he'd never noticed before, nestled between a dry cleaner and a bodega in a neighborhood where CEOs didn't venture. His cubicle had beige walls and fluorescent lighting that buzzed constantly. His computer was 3 years old and took forever to boot up. His desk chair squeaked with every movement. Carson, his 32-year-old boss, stopped by during Daniel's first week. "Hey Danny, great work on the Henderson proposal, really solid stuff, keep it up." The Henderson proposal had taken Daniel 45 minutes. At Lewis Enterprises, it would have been delegated to an intern. This was his life now, but the worst part wasn't the pay cut or the cubicle or being called Danny. The worst part was how invisible he'd become. People walked past him without recognition. The barista at his regular coffee shop suddenly didn't remember his order. The doorman at his old building pretended not to see him when he drove past. Daniel Lewis, Billionaire CEO, had vanished. In his place was just Daniel, consultant, nobody. 3 weeks into his new job, the Wall Street Journal article published. Daniel read it during lunch, alone in his cubicle, watching his legacy get rewritten in real time. Strategic mastermind Greta Andrews, the woman behind Lewis Enterprises' success. The article was thorough, devastating, and completely accurate. It detailed Greta's consulting work, her frameworks, her strategies. It included testimonials from former colleagues at Lewis Enterprises confirming that Daniel's most celebrated business moves had originated from conversations with his wife. Thomas was quoted, "In retrospect, it's clear that Greta Andrews was the strategic architect of our company's success. Daniel was the public face, but she was the mind behind it all." Victoria Hartwell, from Meridian Group. "We're honored to have Greta joining our team. Her strategic insights are unparalleled in the industry. Companies don't realize what they have until she's working for their competition." Daniel was mentioned once, dismissively, as someone who'd taken credit for collaborative work. By end of business that day, 3 more Lewis Enterprises clients had announced they were moving to Meridian Group. All 3 cited Greta's strategic vision as the primary factor. Daniel's phone buzzed. "Thomas, thanks for destroying everything we built. Hope your affair was worth it." That weekend, Daniel received formal notice that the penthouse sale was complete. He had 2 weeks to remove any remaining belongings. The new owners, a tech entrepreneur and his family, were moving in on the 1st. Daniel drove to the penthouse one last time, used his old key, which somehow still worked, walked through rooms that echoed with absence. The living room where Charles had taken his first steps, the kitchen where Greta used to cook Sunday dinners, where they'd drunk wine and talked about dreams, the bedroom where they'd been happy once, before everything slowly rotted from the inside. Daniel packed the last boxes, personal items, photos, things the movers had missed or he'd hidden away. Found Charles's baby shoes in the back of a closet. Found Greta's old law school diploma that she'd never bothered to hang up. Found a birthday card Charles had made him 3 years ago, construction paper and marker, spelling errors and crooked hearts. He sat on the floor surrounded by evidence of a life he'd destroyed and finally cried, not gracefully, not quietly, just cried until there was nothing left. His phone buzzed. The lawyer, Patterson. "Divorce finalized. Settlement executed. You'll receive confirmation documents by end of week." Daniel read the text 3 times. It was done. Officially over. 12 years of marriage dissolved by signatures and legal process. He stood, took one last look around, and left the penthouse forever. Outside, he saw something that stopped him cold. Through the building's main windows, he could see into the penthouse. The new family was already moving in. A man, a woman, 2 small children. They were laughing, directing movers, building their life in the space where Daniel's had ended. Life continuing without him, the world moving forward. Daniel drove away. Monday he returned to work. Carson had assigned him a new project analyzing social media trends for a restaurant client. Daniel, who'd once overseen a company valued at hundreds of millions, was now tracking Twitter mentions for a burger franchise. His phone buzzed. Another notification, Charles's school portal. His son had been selected for the advanced science program. The note said Charles showed exceptional aptitude and passion for scientific inquiry. Daniel hadn't even known there was an advanced science program, hadn't known Charles was interested in science beyond the project from weeks ago. He was missing everything. That afternoon, Daniel's LinkedIn profile notification showed former colleagues had removed their endorsements. His network, once thousands strong, was evaporating. People were quietly distancing themselves from the scandal, from the failure, from the reminder of how fast someone could fall. Thursday night, Daniel drove past the family home in the Hamptons, pulled into the driveway but didn't get out. Through lit windows, he could see Greta and Charles making dinner together. The boy was laughing, covered in flour, exactly like that photo from his 3rd birthday. Greta was smiling, relaxed in a way Daniel hadn't seen in years. They looked happy, lighter, free. They looked like people who'd removed an obstacle and could finally breathe. Daniel was the obstacle. He'd been the weight dragging them down, the source of tension and unhappiness. And now that he was gone, they were thriving. His phone buzzed. Email from his apartment complex, the extended stay hotel he'd been living in for 2 months. Rates were increasing. He'd need to pay an additional $40 per night or find somewhere else. Daniel did the math. At current spending, his remaining assets would last approximately 1 year, maybe 18 months if he was careful. 1 year to figure out how to rebuild a life from absolute zero. His phone buzzed again. Social media notification. Judy Foster had posted an engagement announcement. The man from the restaurant, the one with silver hair. She looked radiant. The caption said, "Found my forever." 3 months. She'd moved from Daniel to engaged in 3 months. He'd been replaced, quickly, easily, like he'd never mattered at all, because he hadn't mattered, not to Judy. She'd wanted security, validation, the lifestyle. When those disappeared, so did she. There had been no real connection, just transaction disguised as romance. Daniel closed his phone, sat in his car outside the Hamptons house, watching his former family live their better life without him. His father's words from years ago echoed, "Success means nothing if you destroy everything good to get it." Daniel had destroyed everything good: his marriage, his relationship with his son, his career, his reputation, his family connections, his sense of self. And for what? 18 months with someone who'd forgotten him before his accounts were even frozen. 18 months of feeling special and desired and important. 18 months that cost him everything. Daniel started his car and drove back to the city. Back to his hotel room that cost too much. Back to his cubicle and his $73,000 salary. Back to his life of supervised visitation and blocked numbers and LinkedIn profiles being scrubbed of his existence. This was the final fall, not the dramatic collapse at Marcus, not the termination from his company, not even the divorce. This, the quiet realization that he'd lost everything and everyone who mattered, and the world had simply moved on without him. He wasn't a villain in anyone's story anymore. He was just absent, forgotten, irrelevant. And there was no one to blame but the man in the mirror. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. 8 months after that fever-bright night when everything burned, Daniel Lewis stood outside Charles's school for the winter holiday concert. He had permission to attend, seated in back, no interaction with Charles before or after. He was 41 years old and needed written authorization to watch his son sing. The school auditorium filled with families, couples holding hands, grandparents with cameras ready. Daniel sat alone in the last row, a ghost haunting his own life. Greta entered with her sister Michelle. She wore navy blue, her hair shorter now. She looked younger than she had a year ago, freer. She spotted Daniel, acknowledged him with the briefest nod, then found a seat 3 rows from the front. The concert began. 3rd graders filed onto risers. Charles was in the 2nd row, taller than Daniel remembered. When had he grown? The children sang, something about winter lights and hope. Charles's voice was clear and confident. He smiled at something another boy whispered. He was happy. Daniel watched his son and understood Charles was going to be fine. He'd grow up with a mother who chose him first. The concert ended. Families flooded the lobby. Daniel waited near the exit. Greta saw him first. Her hand moved to Charles's shoulder. She said something to Michelle, who took Charles toward the parking lot. Then Greta walked over. They stood 3 feet apart. "You're not supposed to be in the lobby." "I know. I just wanted to see him." "You did. Now leave." Silence hung between them. Then Daniel said, "Greta, I need to say this. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know it's too late. But I understand now. What I destroyed..." "Daniel." Her voice was steady. "I don't need your apology. I needed those things 8 months ago. Now, I need you to sign visitation reports on time. That's our only relationship. Is there any chance?" "No." The word was absolute. Greta looked at him. "You want to know the worst part? I don't even hate you anymore. I did for a while. But now I just feel nothing. You're Charles's father, that's all. And honestly, I'm grateful." "For what?" "For showing me exactly who you were before I wasted another decade." She started to walk away. "Does he hate me?" Greta stopped. "No, He's confused and hurt, but he doesn't hate you. He's better than both of us. He gets that from you. I know. Greta left. Daniel watched her join Charles and Michelle. They were laughing. He was not part of it. Daniel drove back to his apartment in Queens, past the building where the penthouse had been, past Marcus, past Manhattan General, all the landmarks of his destruction. His phone buzzed. Charles's school portal. The January visitation schedule, January 12th and 26th, 2 hours each, 2 hours a month with his son. Daniel unlocked his apartment. The lease renewal sat on the counter. Rent was increasing. His phone buzzed. Work email. Carson, hey Danny, great job on the Martinez campaign. Daniel sat on his second-hand couch, looked around at this small life. There was a box in his closet. He opened it. Inside, the wedding album. He flipped through pages. Greta in her dress. Daniel young and certain. There was a photo. Greta holding newborn Charles, looking at the camera with pure joy. Daniel beside her, looking at them both like he'd discovered everything. That man had believed he could be good. Where had he gone? Daniel closed the album, put it back, turned off the light. He didn't know how to fix what he'd broken. Maybe you couldn't. His phone buzzed, a voicemail from 3 hours ago. Charles's voice. Hi, Dad. Mum said I could call. I just wanted to say the concert was good. I sang the solo. Mum recorded it if you want to see. Anyway, bye. Daniel listened 5 times. His son had called. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. But it was something. Daniel saved the voicemail. Then he opened his journal and wrote, I don't know if I can be the father I promised to be. But I'm going to try. Not for redemption, just because Charles deserves better. Even if better is just showing up, I'll be better for him. He closed the journal, sat in the dark, and for the first time in 8 months, Daniel Lewis felt something other than regret. He felt possibility, small, fragile, uncertain, but there.